The Federal Reserve was trying to renovate their building quietly, internally. No big announcement, no press tour. Just a simple, modest $3 billion construction project. And for a while, nobody was really talking about it, but then Trump found out, and he wasn't happy about all the spending. He wasn't happy at all. Trump called the renovation corrupt. He said it was disgraceful. And to add a twist of irony to the whole situation, while Trump is blasting the Fed for wasting money on a remodel, he is also planning a $200 million ballroom expansion at the White House. You can't make this stuff up. So the question is, what actually is this $3 billion project? Is the Fed secretly building a luxury fortress with our money, or is this just a routine and necessary refresh to an old building? Today, we are going to talk about how a dusty old marble building became ground zero for one of the most entertaining political fights of the year. The Federal Reserve headquarters, officially called the Marriner S. Eccles Building, sits on Constitution Avenue, right in the heart of Washington, D.C. It's big, it's basically made of marble, and on the surface, it kind of looks like every other important government building in the Capitol. But this building's different. This is the location where the Federal Reserve Board of Governors meets. This is where interest rates get set, where monetary policy gets debated. The decisions that affect your mortgage, your savings account, your job, they all start here. The Marriner Building was built in 1937, and for nearly 90 years, it served the same basic function: be the command center of American economic policy. There's a lot of important stuff that happens inside this building, but there is one problem with the building. It's old. Like most buildings from the 1930s, the Marriner Building wasn't exactly designed with modern infrastructure in mind. We're talking asbestos, outdated HVAC, poor accessibility, mechanical systems are way past their lifespan. These are the kinds of things where any commercial developer who looks at buying a place like this, for example, they're gonna look at it and be like, yeah, we need to gut this building. And gut this building is exactly what the Fed decided to do back in 2017. Long before this whole thing turned into a political scandal, the Fed quietly got the ball rolling on a full-scale renovation. The plan was to modernize the building, expand the workspace, improve accessibility, and connect it with a building next door, the William McChesney Martin Jr. building. The goal was to create one continuous campus for the Fed's operation. By 2019, construction plans were being finalized, and by 2021, workers started clearing the building out. The renovation would be incredibly expensive. Early estimates said that they would spend somewhere around $1.9 billion, which sounds like a lot, but a lot of the space would be renovated here. We're talking like 400,000 square feet in total. A big red flag is the budget, but the thing that a lot of people don't realize, myself included, is that the Fed, for situations like this, does not actually use taxpayer money. It funds itself through earnings on its own investments, so when they say they're gonna spend $2 billion on a renovation, they didn't need to go to Congress and get budget approval. They just did it. For a few years, not many people even really noticed that construction was happening unless you either worked here or you were in the area. And reporters, they weren't really talking all that much about the project. In July of 2025, though, all of that changed. The budget number hit the headlines like a punch to the gut. They said, here's how the Fed's renovation budget ballooned to $2.5 billion. Why does renovating the Fed cost $2.5 billion? When people started talking, it didn't take long for the firestorm to start. I mean, even for me, I'm looking at it like as a residential contractor thinking, how in the world do you spend $2.5 billion on a renovation? Like, out here in Arizona, at least, if you're trying to build a top of the line house, like we're talking fully custom with all the bells and whistles, you're gonna spend something like maybe $750 per square foot at the most. And that's for ground up construction, but using that as a baseline comparison, knowing that the Fed building is a 400,000 square foot building we're talking about, applying that same math of $750 per square foot, I mean, that gets us to $300 million. I know it's not a perfect apples to apples comparison, but you guys see what I'm saying, like $2.5 billion. What? Critics of all this news were outraged. Headlines screamed about waste. Online commentators were calling it ostentatious, extravagant. People were referring to all these unnecessary high-end features like rooftop terraces, marble facades, elevators to executive dining rooms. All of this was in direct conflict with the Fed's denial about these kinds of luxuries in his testimony to Congress. One senator actually even compared the project to the Palace of Versailles, which is kind of funny. The loudest voice of all, though, as you could expect here, was President Donald Trump. He referred to the renovation as corrupt, unjustified, and disgraceful. One of his allies called for Fed Chair Jerome Powell to be criminally investigated due to his handling of the renovation and allegedly lying under oath. And suddenly, Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, a man known for being measured and cautious, found himself in the middle of a political street fight. This was a very weird moment in politics, and there's a reason a lot of news outlets were calling this basically unprecedented. See, the Fed is supposed to be independent. It's not a political agency. And for most of its history, the chairman of the Federal Reserve has stayed way out of the public spotlight. Trump changed that, though. It started in early 2018 when Trump appointed Powell. Within a year, though, his opinion on Powell changed drastically. By 2019, Trump was publicly calling Powell clueless. In tweets, he blamed Powell and the Fed for stalling economic growth. And throughout 2020 and beyond, the feud escalated. Trump lobbed insults like moron and Mr. Late, pressing for rate cuts, and he even floated the idea of trying to get Powell fired. So yeah, when people started talking more about the renovation and going so far over budget, this wasn't just about the budget for Trump. This was personal. Trump pretty much saw an opportunity to turn a construction project into a political weapon. Powell saw an attack on the integrity of the entire institution. Powell claimed that the renovation cost was only around $2.5 billion, which is only $600 million over budget. Trump claimed his records showed that they actually are on track to spend around $3.1 billion for these renovations. The truth is, they're fighting over a technicality here. There are 3 buildings in total. Trump is looking at all 3 buildings as being a part of the same scope of work, which does add up to over $3 billion in total cost, according to data found on the Fed's website. Powell, on the other hand, is saying that the Martin building shouldn't be included in that number because the renovations there were completed 5 years ago. I can see both sides here, but from my point of view, it seems like, okay, even though the Martin building was finished 5 years ago, this whole project has been under construction for 5 years. So in a way, that building is still kind of under the same scope of work in my mind. I mean, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. If you go to the Fed's website, though, they are just calling this renovation its own project, a renovation of 2 historic buildings. So basically, they're trying to say that, yes, they did spend $500 million renovating the Martin building as well, but that's irrelevant in their mind. Enough about the drama, though. Let's break this down and talk about what exactly is this $2.5 or $3 billion being spent on. According to the official project description, the goal of the project is to fully modernize the buildings, which have not been comprehensively renovated since their construction in the 1930s. The renovation is supposed to include remediation and updates to make the building safer by removing asbestos and lead contamination. They're doing complete replacement of antiquated systems like electrical, plumbing, HVAC, and fire suppression systems. Major structural work is happening to bring the buildings up to modern code, including accessibility and security standards. It's not just a facelift we're talking about here. This is a full interior rebuild. Floors are being gutted, new walls are being framed, and because it's a historic building, all of this has to be done with special care to preserve the architectural integrity of the original design. So going back to how do you spend billions of dollars on a remodel, basically, it's expensive because it's complicated, like really complicated. One of the more challenging aspects of the project, and one that has been the source of controversy, is the use of marble. The original buildings were built with marble in the facades and stonework, and as a part of the scope on this project, they have salvaged that original exterior marble to be reinstalled, and then they'll use new domestic marble where the original was damaged. There's a slew of historic guidelines that need to be followed to make sure that the new project, when it's all finished, looks as close to the old project as possible. This whole thing is being managed by the Federal Reserve's Board of Governors, which means it's overseen by an internal staff but executed by external contractors. So that $2 or $3 billion number, it's not just construction, it includes everything: planning, demolition, materials, labor, infrastructure, security, art preservation. It's a massive undertaking, but one that technically did need to be done, for one, to make the building better and safer for everybody who does work there, but for two, because this project is supposed to reduce costs for the Fed over time, since it will allow the board to consolidate its operations and reduce expenses on buildings they are leasing in other parts of town. By the end of July 2025, the Fed's renovation story officially went from real estate news to full-blown political war. Trump relentlessly hammered the renovation on Truth Social, at rallies, during interviews, labeling Powell stubborn and slamming some of the borderline luxurious project details. He never claimed that Powell was lining his own pockets or enriching himself through this renovation. I mean, in reality, Powell does have no financial stake in the building. Trump was just using the story to hammer home on his broader message that the system is corrupt, the elites are out of touch, and he's the only one willing to call it out. The truth is, though, that Trump, I don't think, really cared all that much about the renovation. Like, he's a real estate developer himself, so he understands the needs to renovate an old building like this and the fact that it costs a lot of money when the building has got a lot of historic details. What Trump's real objective here is, in my opinion, is to draw more attention to the fact that Jerome Powell and the Fed need to do something about these interest rates. So if Trump could make a bit of a spectacle of this massive budget overrun happening at the Fed renovation project, he would indirectly get people talking more about the Fed needing to make some changes. And yeah, Powell usually flies under the radar, but in a rare public defense, he did push back on all this firmly in a former letter to the White House, saying the renovation had been under development for years and was essential to ensure the buildings were safe, healthy, and effective places to work. He didn't mention Trump by name, but he denied allegations of luxury add-ons like private elevators or rooftop terraces, and he even adjusted the Q&A on the Fed website to address some of these concerns. CNN, NPR, and the New York Times all, of course, ran segments on the drama. The Wall Street Journal published a piece defending the renovation. Members of Congress started weighing in, some calling for investigations, others dismissing it as political theater. This whole thing is entertaining, to say the least. I'm neutral when it comes to all of it, but when I was putting this video together, I did find a story that I felt like was a little bit ironic. We've got Trump tearing into Powell over this $3 billion renovation when, at pretty much the same time, he announced the start of a $200 million luxury ballroom for the White House, complete with gold leaf decor and Corinthian columns. To Trump's credit, the ballroom is going to be privately funded by himself and other Patriot donors, though. This is going to be a large event space, about 90,000 square feet, designated to accommodate over 600 guests for events, state dinners, stuff like that. He also installed two massive 88-foot flagpoles on the north and south lawn of the White House in June, although, again, Trump did pay for those himself. He's in the process of bulldozing the Rose Garden to pave over it and make more room for people at White House events. Then we've got the Oval Office, which has become more of a golden room. Not that any of that matters. Like I said, Trump is paying for all those updates to the White House anyway, but like I said, it's just funny timing. As of today, the Fed renovation is still in progress. They say they're on track to finish by 2027, which in reality probably means closer to 2029. Trump and the American people, in reality, don't care all that much about the renovation. All we want is lower interest rates. And Powell, as always, remains mysterious as to what his next move will be. Probably not the last time that we're going to be hearing about all this. Never a dull moment. I'll see you guys next week.